The sun had just dipped below the horizon, casting a warm amber glow over the suburban neighborhood. The houses, each with their manicured lawns and neatly trimmed hedges, stood in silent testimony to the lives lived within. Inside one of these homes, the atmosphere was anything but serene. "I can't believe you did this." Mark's voice cut through the stillness, his tone a mix of disbelief and fury. He stood in the doorway of their living room, his tall frame silhouetted against the dim light filtering in from the hallway. His eyes, usually so kind and gentle, were now hard and intense as they locked onto his wife. "Sarah." Sarah sat on the edge of the couch, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She could feel the weight of his gaze, heavy and accusatory. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat sending a fresh wave of dread coursing through her. "Mark, please, let me explain," she pleaded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Explain?" Mark scoffed, taking a step closer. "You want to explain how I found out about your affair with David? How long has this been going on, Sarah?" Sarah's breath hitched. She hadn't expected him to find out so soon, or so thoroughly. The secret had been their little bubble, safe and insulated from the rest of their lives. But now, with Mark standing before her, it felt as fragile as a soap bubble, ready to burst at any moment. "It's not what you think," she began, her voice trembling. "We didn't plan for this to happen." "Didn't plan?" Mark echoed, his anger simmering just beneath the surface. "So it just happened, like some sort of accident? You two fell into bed together by mistake?" Sarah flinched at his harsh words, but there was no denying the truth. Their affair had started innocently enough, a chance encounter at a mutual friend's party, a few stolen glances, and then more. It had all escalated quickly, fueled by a fire that neither of them could control. "I don't know how to make this right," she admitted, tears welling up in her eyes. "But I never wanted to hurt you, Mark." "Hurt me?" he repeated, incredulous. "You've shattered everything, Sarah. Everything we built together. Everything we believed in." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every line of his body. "And now here I am, finding out from someone else's wife about my own wife's infidelity." Sarah's eyes widened in shock. "What do you mean?" "Lynn called me today," Mark replied, his voice cold and unyielding. "She told me everything about how you and David have been meeting behind our backs, how you've been sneaking around like some cheap romance novel." Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Lynn, David's wife, knew. And if she knew, then it wouldn't be long before everyone else found out. The humiliation, the shame, it was almost too much to bear. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I never meant for any of this to happen. I love you. Truly I do. But I don't know how to stop this." Mark shook his head, his expression pained. "Love isn't supposed to feel like this, Sarah. Love doesn't lie, doesn't cheat, doesn't destroy." He took a deep breath, as if steeling himself for what he was about to say next. "I can't live like this anymore. I can't pretend that everything is okay when it's not." Sarah's heart sank at his words. She had known this moment would come, but hearing it spoken aloud made it all the more real. The finality of it, the irrevocability. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she asked, her voice shaky. Mark nodded slowly. "Yes, Sarah. We need to separate. We need space to figure out what's left of us." Sarah closed her eyes, the tears finally spilling over. She had lost him, and there was nothing she could do to change it. The life they had built together was crumbling around them, and she was powerless to stop it. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "I'll go pack my things." As she rose from the couch, Mark stepped aside to let her pass. His eyes followed her as she walked down the hallway, the weight of their silence heavy between them. The house, once filled with laughter and warmth, now felt hollow and empty. In the bedroom, Sarah began to gather her belongings, her movements mechanical and numb. Each item she packed away was like a piece of her heart being stripped away, leaving her raw and exposed. Just as she was folding a sweater, Mark appeared in the doorway. His presence was a stark reminder of what they had lost. And yet, there was still a part of her that longed for him, that ached for the life they had once shared. "Sarah," he began, his voice softer now, tinged with regret. "I never wanted this for us." She looked up at him, her eyes red and swollen from crying. "I know, Mark. Neither did I." They stood there for a moment, the air thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. And then, without another word, Sarah turned back to her packing, the sound of fabric rustling the only noise in the quiet room. As she continued to fill her suitcase, her thoughts drifted to David. What would happen to them now, with both of their marriages falling apart? Where did that leave them? Would they even survive this? Or would the fallout be too great to overcome? Her mind raced with questions, each one leading to more uncertainty. She had hoped that their affair would remain a secret, a hidden sanctuary where they could escape the pressures of their everyday lives. But now, with the truth laid bare, there was no hiding, no running away. Finally, after what felt like hours, Sarah finished packing. She zipped up her suitcase and turned to face Mark, her expression solemn. "I guess this is it then," she said quietly. Mark nodded, his jaw tight. "Yeah, I guess it is." Without another word, Sarah picked up her suitcase and walked past him, her steps heavy with the weight of her decision. As she reached the front door, she paused, her hand gripping the handle tightly. "Goodbye, Mark," she murmured, her voice choked with emotion. He didn't respond, his silence speaking volumes. And with that, Sarah opened the door and stepped out into the night, the cool air hitting her like a slap in the face. As she walked down the driveway, the lights of their home flickering behind her, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held. Would she and David be able to navigate the wreckage of their marriages and find something new together? Or would they too be devoured by the very secrets they had tried so desperately to keep? The answers remained shrouded in darkness, just like the path ahead of her, and as she disappeared into the night, the only certainty was the end of one chapter, and the uncertain beginning of another.